the fastest show in sports.
Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final this year was everything it was supposed to be. That was a brilliant game. It was an on the edge of your seat game all night long. Goes to overtime. Kevin, I got to tell you, it says once again, I don't understand why people say, and I've heard this again, I saw this actually in the last 24 hours. Somebody said it was a boring game. Hockey is boring. Are you insane? What are you watching? It is impossible. That is one of the most exciting things, the Stanley Cup, that you can watch every single year. It was a great game to watch.
I have no idea how anyone can say who understands even a little bit of the sport of hockey, how you could say that game 1 was boring. Let's break it down in this way. A year ago, if Florida goes up 3-1, that game is over and done with. Yes. Maybe by the way, that's a boring game. You have a team representing an entire country, a country that hasn't won the cup since I was a sophomore in high school, 1993. The country is begging for the Stanley Cup. The country has this newest star in the sport, and that's Connor McDavid. And he helps engineer the game-winning goal to the number 2.
What a beautiful assist.
Right, Mike? It was incredible.
And so the thing about McDavid is one of those generational players that if you're on the ice, if you're off the ice, you've got to know where he is at every single second, where he is and what he is doing, because he doesn't have to score. He changes the game. But Kevin, to your point, the other side of that too is last year they didn't have Leon Draisaitl.
They had him, but he didn't perform.
Correct. Well, that's what I'm saying. They didn't have him. Yep. He was pretty much a non-entity in the Stanley Cup Final last year. Has 2 goals in game 1. He's at and we talked about this a little bit off the air. You've got to have that great star player, but you've also got to have those 1Bs and 1Cs, those guys who are just a tick below. That's Draisaitl. Changes the whole game.
Mike, you remember this from all your days in the NBA. Jerry Sloan used to say, you need 2 greats, a good, and everyone else. If you have that, you win a championship. I'm trying to figure out the hockey equivalent because it's different, but it's not so one-on-one. But look, if you've got Draisaitl and McDavid, you're ahead of the game because that's a hell of a start.
No, it's Jerry Sloan's exactly right, and God rest Jerry Sloan. What a character he was. Boy, Jeannie Buss once told me that people think Pat Riley is, he makes women coo. He goes, no, it's the men who are attracted to Pat Riley. He's a dude magnet. And I'm like, no, that's what Jerry Sloan was. He's a dude magnet. And he was you just wanted to be Jerry Sloan. He was so cool. Anyway, the Caps had, what did they have? When they won in 2018, they had Ovechkin. They had Nicholas Backstrom, and then they had Evgeny Malkin.
No.
They didn't have
another Russian. They had another Russian.
But there's a point in there, Mike, because
Malkin actually is probably from Crosby, and then Malkin, and then they had another guy. But God, who am I thinking of now? The Russian guy.
Unless you really know the game, and that's the thing about hockey, because hockey is not if you take it in the line of basketball, football, and baseball, you have a consistent group of players that are on the field at all times, offense and defense, whatever it is. Rarely changes. It changes a little bit in basketball more than any other sport. But hockey is constantly changing. So if you don't know the game inside and out, it's very easy to lose that second, third, and fourth tier player because you're still focused on the superstar when he's on the ice. But if you then know the game, you can say, okay, I've got 4 lines. Here's the one centering this line. Here's the one here. Here's the important one here. There's a critical cog in every single line. You've got to know those players. But sometimes, Mike, those secondary and third players, they become anonymous. And they don't really care because they're still part of the attack.
Mike Kuzi.
The third player. Go ahead.
Kuznetsov.
Evgeny Kuznetsov. Yeah, he had like the screaming eagle goal against the Panthers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and vanquished them. Anyway, but you're right. Unless you have a hot goalie like the old Edmonton Oilers, who they have Grant Fuhrer.
Grand
Grant
Fury.
Fuhrer.
You had Gretzky, Messier, and Grant Fuhrer was basically if there because he was just nails. There's so many. I mean, there's so many great goalies throughout. Marty Brodeur, who the Avalanche have forever.
Yeah, Patrick
Patrick
Waugh.
Waugh.
Waugh,
They had Waugh.
Patrick Waugh. Yeah, and so if you had and that. I mean, look. The bottom line is that arena went wild last night at whatever it was Edmonton time. It opened the Stanley Cup. 77% of teams that win Game One win the Stanley Cup Finals. I don't buy that anymore because like sports stats are always made to be broken. And I believe the Panthers traveled the day before or something. They didn't really get to
Yes.
Edmonton that early.
Yeah,
And
they did.
so they're probably a little tired. I expect them to see him play well in game two and probably win game two. But either way, this to me has the looks of a 6-7 game series. It's total drama. It's pulsating. I always say, I remember Barry Svrluga, the Washington Post, and me did dueling columns one day saying, what's better, the NHL playoffs or the NBA playoffs? And what I forgot to mention in my argument for the NBA was, and I would have killed my argument was, there's no sudden death. There's sudden death
Yeah.
in playoff hockey. It's like being at a heavyweight fight ringside and somebody's winning, and then all of a sudden there's a roundhouse right, and it's over.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
so fast and exciting and crazy, and you go from depression to absolute euphoria in a second.
There's
Well, it's
also
funny. I'm
another
in
part
a
of this,
car.
and I don't know, but we brought it up here a couple of minutes ago. Edmonton represents an entire country. I mean, that's
But you know what I was going to ask?
big thing.
I was
there.
going to ask you that, Kevin. You probably have talked about it before. Do you think other Canadian fan bases, the Leafs, the Senators, the Jets, the Vancouver Canucks, they're all rooting for Edmonton?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe that. I believe they are. They're just Canadians treat hockey differently. Unlike here in the U.S., if you hate the Florida Panthers or you hate a team, you're not going to find an Islander fan rooting for the Rangers to win the cup, right? If it were if the Rangers were the only hope to hang on to the cup in the United States, the Islander fan just says, I actually hope the Stanley Cup Final implodes. That's what they would say. I don't want it. I hope it doesn't happen. I think the only option would have been what? Ed, what would you say? Leafs? If it were a Leafs or Canadians in there, then those two fan bases wouldn't be rooting for each other.
Because hockey is a generational sport in Canada. It is part of their social and fabric makeup. I mean, I've seen a couple of maps already this morning, and I think they're pretty accurate, where it talks about how 97% of the country, it's like they had it all colored out, rooting for Edmonton, and it was like this one little spot in South Canada that had a Panthers logo on it, and I think that probably would be very true. It is national pride more than anything else because it is their sport. I mean, look, members of the Edmonton Oilers brought in pieces of ice rinks from their home. Now, this is a true story, and I'm not sure how many of them did it, but they had refrigerated ice from their home rinks. It was either high school or Pee Wee or something where they started, and they took that, they put it on the ice at the Rogers Center, and they mixed it in with the ice as they were getting everything ready because they wanted it to be, it's our game, and that's what it is. That's the level of tremendous support.
I want to see that story. That's great.
Think about that.
I love those kind of stories. I think there was one. The Texas Tech softball coach had made all made all his players on the team bring in their little kids softball, their t-ball pictures, and they put them up in the dugout of all their girls. And I think that's the kind of stuff, man. That's sports right there.
Well,
that's passion is what that is.
That's remember where you came from.
Yes.
Remember
Yes.
remember where you came from. Remember where this all started. Remember how hard you worked to get here. And remember also everyone who sacrificed with you along the way. That's what that is.
Part of it
It's
too
not-
is, and if you take it down and break it down to the nationalist side of things here,
Yep.
if you look at hockey, even in America, yes, there are more American-born players than there have been in many years past, but there are still a tremendous amount of Asians, Russians, Europeans, Canadians. You now have, they're talking about Australian players. You now are talking also about Far Eastern players at one time. You're talking about this in where fans of the National Hockey League don't have an America first sort of thinking to it because it's technically not an American game and the teams are not American, so they find it difficult to identify it. And I think that's part of what goes on here. There's almost like we don't want to root for Canada because we want to root for Americans. There's a little jingoism that goes on here.
Time out.
Sure.
You're telling me hockey's diverse? Hockey is
Shocking.
maybe the Canadian fan base is diverse, but oh my, hockey is like winter. Hockey is whiter than the Winter Olympics. It's whiter than Downton Abbey.
Yeah, but it's all changing, Mike. I mean, there are a lot of African-American players that are now in the National Hockey League more than ever before. But it's not even, I'm not even talking about race. I'm talking about nationalistic pride. You have countries that are represented from around the world.
I do agree with that. That doesn't matter whether you're black, Asian, Native American, which Canada has many indigenous tribes. Like there is a genuine pride about your hockey team that transcends culture, race, ethnicity, and it's not the same as it is in the States.
Canadians have a pride for the sport.
But that Edmonton crowd, I literally. There were more black people at the GOP convention than there were in that Edmonton crowd last night.
Well, yeah, hockey has still had a problem breaking through the racial barrier in America. Maybe not even in other countries, but certainly in America. It is still a very white sport. It is a very elite sport in some areas. I mean, you still have guys. I mean, when I was in Massachusetts and I was around Paul Stewart, who was an American official, one of my best friends, he actually is noted in the Hall of Fame for being one of the few American-born officials, first American-born. I forget exactly what it is. But when I went to his house for holiday, he lived on a cul-de-sac, and there were maybe 10 houses in this cul-de-sac. You come on the street and it opens up. 9 of these houses had backyard rinks.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you went there in the wintertime for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, when you went there in January, everybody's rink was filled. Everybody's rink was there. The kids are all playing on the rink. That's the generational side of things, and that's the societal side of things that hockey brings to certain areas. But you won't find that in a lot of other places. I'll say this much. You're now seeing more potential professional players come from the Sun Belt in the Tampa area and in Miami. We've got huge club teams down here that are playing. We've got kids. Who's the one from? I'm off my game here for a second. Who's the one player on the Florida Panthers who actually is from South Florida? I cannot think of it. It's gone right now.
I remember this. I remember the story. Of the last year or during their first Cup run. I remember that story. But hey, let's look at this reason why. Ed, when did the Panthers take out the Rangers? When did the Panthers play the Avalanche? 96?
96.
In the Cup? 96. So that now is what? 30 years ago? It's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Guess when you start having kids. So you understand where I'm going.
Yeah.
All those young kids.
They grew up with it.
Bingo, Mike. All those young kids in 1996, everything that South Florida has for hockey, I will be willing to bet trace back to the original Rats.
Sure.
The original,
without question.
But this is how sports grow, and this is how regions grow in sports. Everyone people want to take something and you want to build a. I know there's your rat. Go get your rat. they want to build a sport and they want to build a region and they want to do it. You got to let it happen organically. And sometimes we don't, in a society, we don't allow that to happen. It takes a generation for it to happen. And it's being proven out with hockey in South Florida. So I love hearing you couldn't try to just jam it down people's throats 20 years ago. They weren't ready for that.
But we have in South Florida, we have a little bit of a societal rift here and a delineation line because Miami is in Dade County.
Yep.
The Panthers play in Broward County, western Broward County, well west of Fort Lauderdale. You have a population that from Dade County's line south is deeply Hispanic.
Okay.
And very different than it is from that point north in Broward County where it is much whiter. It is much more profitable in other areas. And then you start going up into Palm Beach County where it gets even wealthier and in many places whiter. And that's where a lot of the hockey base is coming from. Because you still have in Miami, the residential population there pretty much goes for their football. They love their Canes. They love their Dolphins. They love the Miami Heat because they love basketball. Nobody loves baseball, but we'll get to that in a couple of minutes anyway. Because in baseball, I mean, here you've got a franchise that is lucky if they get 5,000 people and a stick of butter to come out to a game.
Yeah, but Miami and Florida in general is a hotbed for baseball prospects because
baseball prospects, but not the game.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
but hockey is growing here and in other places. They got it right. In Arizona, for instance, they screwed the pooch. They got nothing right in Arizona.
Right.
From the ownership to the arena to the players to once Gretzky left and got out, they did absolutely nothing to try and grow the game. The other part of it is here, you have with the Panthers an ownership in Vinny Viola, who's a New York businessman who came in, did everything right. Hired hockey people, didn't let his ego get in the way. I mean, look, for game one last night, they had people come out to the arena to watch the game on the jumbotrons there.
Yep.
With a setup on the ice to where you could see the players where they would be in real time. $15.
Yeah.
$15 in free parking. Holy crap! Free parking at a sporting event? I mean,
I know.
That in itself is genius. But it is
I don't know.
growing, and you do have
know.
to give it a generational time. I agree.
That's all, folks.